Good morning. It is Wednesday, May 13th. Um, we are in the middle of talking about loneliness, being alone. One of the things that may sound crazy, may sound a little out there, is that loneliness is not always bad. We tend to think when we think of loneliness or being alone that it automatically goes to the negative side. But there is a spiritual practice that we tend to often overlook in society, and it's a practice called solitude. Um, I remember growing up, I didn't get in trouble a lot, but when I did get in trouble, my grandma would, of course, send me to my room, and I had a TV in my room and, like a console in my room, and she'd say, you better not do anything in that room but be in solitude and pray. Or she was like, just sit there and be bored. Um, and I always, of course, automatically thought, when I was in trouble, like, oh gosh, you didn't want to be alone. You didn't want to be in solitude, as they say. But solitude is something that we see Jesus model for us. In Luke 5:16, it tells us, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. I think a lot of times when we talk about Jesus' ministry, for the 3 years or however long he did it, we always look at it from, or at least I always tend to look at it from the disciples' point of view, like, man, the disciples spent every day with Jesus. But then I often forget that Jesus spent every day with 12 other men. People were around Jesus everywhere during his ministry. His 12 disciples, a group of maybe about 100 other consistent followers. He had crowds of, thousands of people who would show up to either hear him teach or to want some sort of miracle done. Jesus had people he loved and people who loved him in his life pretty much consistently day in, day out for 3-4 years. There were people in his life all the time. And that has got to be exhausting. One of the things that I have done really since, I started doing this when I was a teenager. When I'd be on like a week-long mission trip with my youth group or camp or something like that, I couldn't wait. As much as it stunk to be back home and not to have those memories anymore and not to be with those people, as much as that part was not fun, I looked forward to getting some time away, being just 100% alone to process how the week went, to process, my friendships that were strengthened and things like that. And I do that even as a youth minister. And it's not to say like I can't wait to get away from you guys when a trip or when a camp is over, but I do look forward to the solitude. One of my favorite memories that I've talked about was being at Rock Cleft, in the summer of 2016, and getting to do that with just our group. It was something that I grew up going to. We had a huge group that year. But one of my favorite things was in the evening, after I taught, I would go to a certain spot at Rock Cleft each night, and I could, I wasn't far from the main lodge, so I could hear all of the because like the screen doors and everything was open. I could hear all the conversations going on, the small group conversations. But I would sit and just pray. I'd pray to God just about giving me strength and giving me wisdom for the following day's lessons, and just spending time with God, going over what I needed to do for the rest of the week. Those were times that I looked forward to. And it's still, it's memories that I cherish. And so solitude isn't always a bad thing. you know? And on Jesus's side was it to catch a breather, or, maybe because one of his disciples was annoying him? I don't necessarily think it's that. I think, he wanted intentional time alone. He wanted to pray. Jesus was trying to say he needed consistent time to get away from everybody and just spend time alone with God, one-on-one. But here's the thing we need to understand. If Jesus needed solitude from time to time, we definitely need solitude from time to time. And the beauty that we can find in this time, during this quarantine, is that there is more than enough opportunity than ever to practice solitude. There is potential right now to have less distractions, fewer demands on your time, so use it. That's kind of been what I've, not necessarily harping, but what I have said over the last several weeks. Take this time to strengthen your relationship with God. Go into your room, shut off everything that could beep or alert or distract you, and just sit in the lonely quietness and pray. I don't know if lonely quietness is a word or, you could use in a sentence right there, but I'm going to do it. Now, did you know what I just said is a part of Scripture? Not necessarily the, turning off everything that beeps at you and things like that. But in Matthew chapter 6, verse 6, Jesus says, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Now, teens, if you remember what we were doing on Wednesday nights before all this happened, we were looking at the Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount is from Matthew chapter 5 to 7. This is in Matthew chapter 6. So Jesus is, probably the most popular and best sermon ever done. He takes a time to talk about going and praying. So my challenge to you is to start small. Try it for 5 minutes. And I'll tell you this, the first time you do it, 5 minutes is going to seem like forever. But if you'll consistently make this a part of your routine, you're probably going to start to crave these moments of solitude where it's just you and God. Even when this whole thing is over and life can go back to normal or, new normal or whatever, you'll probably find yourself craving some moments of solitude just to be alone with God. And so that is my challenge to you today. Take 5 minutes. Go. Be alone with God. Spend some time with Him. So that's all I have, and I'll see you tomorrow.